today's English lesson, we are going to be looking at Pearl Harbour. It's a really important point in World War II, and it marks the entry of the United States into the war itself. So the first thing we need to look at is why America weren't part of the war in the first place. Well, most Americans thought that they shouldn't get involved in a European war again because they'd been heavily involved in World War I, and all of the countries involved in that war had taken a very long time to recover. So not many people wanted to get involved in another world war, especially when America wasn't directly affected by it, because it was happening all the way on the other side of the world in Europe. And you can see in this cartoon here, which is actually by Dr. Seuss, what you've got is a political cartoon that was published in the papers, and what you've got is this bird which represents America. You can see he's wearing a bit of an Uncle Sam hat, and the bird is saying, "Ho hum, when he's finished pecking down that last tree, he'll quite likely be tired." And you can see the bird over here is a caricature of Hitler, and he's got a swastika in his feathers. And the idea is that the Hitler bird has been chopping down all these trees, and you can see each of these trees is a country that had been invaded by Germany. And the one he's chopping down at the moment is England, because Americans tend to think that Britain equals England, and they kind of forget about Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. So here we have the Hitler bird attacking England, and America is sitting with its back to the world, pretending that everything is going to be fine. And he's kind of saying, "Oh, well, I'm sure he'll stop after he's finished with this one," which, of course, the implication is that, no, of course he won't. He'll come for America next. So there was a growing sort of discussion about whether America should be taking part, but at the time, sort of in the early 1940s, the general idea was that they shouldn't. They should just leave it alone. So when Britain declared war on Germany in 1939, America didn't join either side. They remained neutral. Now, before the attack, World War II had been raging in Europe and Asia for 2 years. This is 1941, we're 2 years into the war, and the United States hadn't taken sides. They'd remained neutral. Now, if you remember when we first started learning about the war, we talked about the Allies and the Axis, and we talked about Japan being part of the Axis. So they were allied with Germany and Italy. So they were on the side that Britain was fighting against. And the Empire of Japan was trying to take over a lot of Asia while everything was going on. And they were a little bit worried about the US Navy, which was stationed in Hawaii. And basically what Japan decided to do was strike the US Navy, and they were planning on basically destroying the vast majority of the naval ships and the air carriers and any planes that were stationed there in order to stop the United States from attacking them and preventing them from taking over any more countries in Asia. That was the plan. Except what actually happened is after the attack, which we will go into in more detail in a second, it actually united America, and it kind of pushed them into joining the war instead of what Japan was hoping, which was just not being able to do anything after all the destruction. So where is Pearl Harbour? Well, this is important. So here we have Tokyo. This is Japan over here, and this is the United States. This is Los Angeles, and kind of, well, a little bit sort of halfway in between, more towards America, are the islands of Hawaii, and this is a bit of a close-up here. Now you can see Tokyo was about 9,500 kilometers away from Hawaii, and Los Angeles is about 6.5, so it's a little bit closer to America, but still pretty crucial for Japan in terms of being able to get to other places in the world. And you can zoom in here a little bit. Pearl Harbour was actually on the island of Oahu, which is here, and it. Oh yeah, that's important. Sorry. The Hawaii was not actually a United States state at the time. It was a US territory, which basically means that kind of America owned it rather than it being part of America. And that changed after World War II as well. And Hawaii became its own state in America. So why was the island important? Well, it was mainly because for Japan, the United States Navy was stationed there. So that was the main reason. But also, Hawaii was very important for importing and exporting goods, because it was in a pretty good position right here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so that you could reach, you can see here, it's pretty close to Sydney, it's pretty Australia, it's pretty close to New Zealand. You could get down to South Africa, and Santiago down here. Oh no, sorry, that's not South Africa. Oh my goodness, that is South America. Sorry, not South Africa. Bit of a slip of the tongue there. So sorry, you could get to North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand, and of course Asia over here. So it was pretty crucial. So it's in a really good spot. And the Japanese didn't like America owning it, so they decided to basically try and take it for themselves. So the attack itself, it happened on Sunday the 7th of December in 1941. The Japanese aeroplanes made a surprise attack on the US Navy in Pearl Harbour. They destroyed many ships, killed many soldiers, and basically it was this attack that forced the United States to enter World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbour came as a complete surprise to the United States Navy. Hundreds of Japanese fighter planes and bombers flew to Pearl Harbour and attacked. There were also submarines, warships, battleships, aircraft carriers. There were a huge attack. The bombers dropped bombs and torpedoes on the warships, while the fighter planes attacked the US fighter planes on the ground, so they couldn't take off and fight back. There were 2 waves of attacks, and by the end of the second wave, a number of US ships had been destroyed, and the entire event only lasted for 2 hours. So why didn't the Americans defend themselves straight away? Well, there's 2 main reasons for that. The first one is that the officers and sailors were actually on shore leave, which was just kind of like a holiday for the personnel. So they were basically having a bit of a break. The second reason is that the guns on the battleships and warships weren't ready to fire. They weren't expecting an attack. They weren't prepared for war. They weren't prepared for battle. So they just weren't ready. So what was the damage of the attack? Well, the citizens of the United States were in shock. They had really tried very hard to avoid being involved in the war at all, but they had been directly attacked, so they couldn't really just ignore it. The Japanese had hoped to break the Americans by attacking Pearl Harbour, but instead they united them. The very next day, on December the 8th, 1941, the USA declared war on Japan, and 3 days later, Japan's allies, which were Germany and Italy, declared war back on the United States. So the United States was now fully a part of World War II. The US Navy was able to recover from the attack on Pearl Harbour pretty quickly, and that was because the Japanese hadn't damaged some important facilities on the Hawaiian Islands, which was basically the oil storage and the repair yards. So that meant that they could repair, they still had all the equipment to repair the damage, and they still had oil, so they were still able to send things, that they still had fuel. Also, no aircraft carriers were in Pearl Harbour at the time of the attack. Now, aircraft carriers are basically massive ships which have planes on them, so that rather than the aeroplanes having to fly across oceans, which they weren't really able to do because it was such a huge distance, so they put the ships on these they put the planes on the ships and sail them across the ocean, and then the planes are able to sort of fly off and do more close attacks then. So that the fact that none of those were destroyed meant that the US Navy still has an awful lot of equipment ready to go. The aircraft carriers would actually soon become the most important type of Navy vessels in the war. So basically this is some of the statistics about what happened in the attack. So the top half of this is what happened to the Americans and the civilians, and the bottom half is Japan. So 169 American planes were destroyed, 21 American ships were damaged or destroyed, 2,403 American personnel and civilians were killed, and then on top of that, a further 1,178 people were injured. There were 29 Japanese aircraft, that's aeroplanes, destroyed. 129 of the Japanese army were killed, and 1 was taken prisoner, and 5 Japanese submarines were sunk. So after the attack, America declared war on Japan, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Declaration of War on the 8th of December 1941. On the 11th of December, Hitler and Mussolini, he was the one, remember, who was the dictator of Italy at the time, declared war on America, and this brought America onto Britain's side. Today, there is a memorial to all the US soldiers who lost their lives during the attack on Pearl Harbour. It's called the USS Arizona Memorial because that was the name of the biggest ship that was destroyed and sunk during the attack. And it's built on the water above the wreckage of the USS Arizona. So you can see the outline here in the water. So that was the original ship, that's the Arizona. And then this is the memorial on top. And the wreckage is now considered a US National Historic Landmark. Now, of course, everybody remembers that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbour, but not everybody realises that now the Japanese visit the memorial themselves in droves, and Japan is now one of America's strongest allies, and the Japanese visitors pay their respects at Pearl Harbour just as Americans do. So how much do you know? Okay, right. You are now going to be doing a quiz. Now, what you need to do is you need to go to Firefly, which I'm going to show you in a second. Here's Firefly. And you need to go to the dashboard. Now, I'm recording this a little while ago, so we're back at the GDSE Song Contest at the moment, so your dashboard may look a little bit different. But basically, you need to click on this bit here, which is going to take you through to the main page. Right at the bottom, you should have a little section here that's called tasks, and what should happen is there should be something there that says Pearl Harbour quiz, which you need to click on, and it will take you through to a multiple choice quiz about the information we've just learnt in the PowerPoint. So that's where you should find it. I think there's another link up here somewhere. Yeah, if you go to tasks, what you should have is something that takes you through here, and you've got a Pearl Harbour quiz thing here as well. So hopefully that should take you to the right place, one of those two. Ideally go for the dashboard one because I know that works more times than not, but at least you've got a spare option there. You need to submit the quiz. It will give you a mark straight away, but then Ms. Hagerty and I will probably send you a comment or some suggestions or something, a little bit of feedback after that as well. If you want to have a bit more of a challenge, obviously don't look back at the PowerPoint to get any hints. If you are struggling and you want to do something a little bit of an easier version, then by all means you can look back at the PowerPoint, but just let Miss Hagerty or I know if you have done that. If you've just done it independently and you've gone for the challenge, then you don't need to tell us anything. But if you have used a little bit of help, just let us know.